when the archaeologist Dinu V. Rossetti excavated Vlad the Impaler's alleged tomb in 1933, he made the most chilling discovery imaginable. Much of Vlad the Impaler's life remains shrouded in mystery and legend, and the details of his birth are no exception. While historians have never confirmed the exact date, there is a range of about 4 years that seem to be the most plausible, considering he had reached the minimum age of candidacy for the throne in 1448. He likely was born around 1431. One thing that has endured, however, is his name. Even before he became known as Vlad the Impaler, Vlad III already carried the moniker of Vlad Dracula, which translates to Son of the Dragon. This was because his father belonged to the Order of the Dragon. Despite being the Dragon, Vlad's father was no stranger to nightmarish rivalries, and one in particular involved Vlad himself. In 1442, Vlad's father decided he would not support an Ottoman invasion of Transylvania, especially after meeting the country's voivode, John Hunyadi. Naturally, this didn't sit right with Sultan Murad II, since Wallachia was an Ottoman vassal state. To prove his loyalty, Vlad II travelled to Gallipoli with his 2 sons, Vlad Țepeș and Radu, at the Sultan's orders. However, the trip back was more lonesome for horrifying reasons. As soon as Vlad II and his sons arrived in Gallipoli, the Ottomans captured and incarcerated them, but only one of them got off easy. The Sultan released Vlad II within the year, but still doubted his loyalty, so he took precautions. As collateral, Murad II kept Vlad Țepeș and Radu imprisoned, just to make sure Vlad II thought twice about betraying the Ottomans. Of course, it wasn't the 2 brothers who would soon meet a terrible fate. Although Vlad II was loyal to the Ottoman Empire, paying a tribute each year didn't save him when enemies came to his doorstep. In November 1447, John Hunyadi, now Hungary's regent governor, marched on Wallachia. Shortly after, Vlad II and his eldest son Mircea perished, allowing Hunyadi to appoint Vlad Țepeș's cousin, Vladislav II, as the new ruler. Eventually, Vlad the Impaler would get his own shot. By the time his father and older brother perished, Vlad III was old enough to lay claim to the rule of Wallachia. Free from imprisonment, his opportunity came when the throne sat vacant in September 1448, as John Hunyadi and Vladislav II marched against the Ottoman Empire. With Ottoman forces behind him, Vlad III returned to Wallachia and took control. But even after enduring such a chaotic upbringing, he still wasn't in the mood for peace. Hunyadi's campaign against the Ottomans hadn't gone as well as Vlad Dracula's return to Wallachia, with Hunyadi and Vladislav II retreating in failure by October 18th. As possibly any effort to avoid further bloodshed, Hunyadi's deputy tried to get Vlad out of Wallachia by inviting him to meet in Transylvania. However, Vlad wasn't ready to back down. Unfortunately for him, this first reign didn't last long. Determined to hold the throne of Wallachia, Vlad Țepeș awaited the return of John Hunyadi and Vladislav II. When they arrived in December, their forces had already diminished from their losing fight against the Ottomans. Still, they proved to be far too strong a force for Vlad's army, and they ousted him after around 2 months of his rule. This wasn't the last they would see of him though. For nearly a decade, Vlad waited to make another attempt at reclaiming the Wallachian throne, although exactly how he eventually did this remains unknown. While it's clear that sometime in mid-1456, Hungary helped him with another invasion, the details surrounding this are vague. What is certain is that by September, he had once again became voivode. As he had helped Vlad reclaim the throne, the Hungarian king believed that Vlad would remain loyal to him. However, when Vlad sent his customary tribute to the Ottoman Sultan, it prompted Hungary's new Captain General, Ladislaus Hunyadi, to call out Vlad for being intentionally unfaithful. Following this, he truly earned his nickname. Content with his violent path, Vlad continued to Transylvania, looting and pillaging the villages surrounding Sibiu and Brasov. It was around this time that the first known examples of Vlad's propaganda among the Germans surfaced, as they told stories of him kidnapping Saxon residents and bringing them to Wallachia, where he would impale them on stakes. This seemingly had his desired effect. While Ladislaus Hunyadi hadn't been a fan of Vlad, his younger brother Mattia Corvinus knew it was better to have the Impaler as a friend rather than an enemy. Therefore, when the people elected Corvinus the King of Hungary in 1458, he gave the Order of Sibiu's residents to maintain peace with Wallachia's ruler. On the other hand, Vlad had no desire for peace. Just 2 years later, Vlad's cousin Dan III tried to invade Wallachia, drawing as much support as he could from the residents of Brasov, Transylvania, where he had settled. However, Vlad quickly put a stop to this invasion and executed Dan before taking revenge on Brasov by plundering its suburbs and impaling the captives he took. Following Dan's invasion in 1460, Vlad spent the next few months enacting his vengeance on the people of Brasov. However, his demeanor changed once he felt his justice had been served. He had settled down and even called the remaining Brasov residents his brothers and friends. With numerous successful shows of force, Vlad was now ready to rebel. By now, Vlad had become ambitious and certainly bloodthirsty enough to try to emerge from under the Ottoman Empire's thumb. While the exact year is again unclear, two sources state that Vlad stopped paying his tribute to Sultan Mehmed II, with one specifying that he refused to for 3 years. However, this may not be exactly what happened. While it's true that Vlad stopped paying his tribute, and although one of these sources was a janissary in the Ottoman army, both records surfaced decades later. Conversely, one of the Sultan's secretaries, Tursun Beg, wrote during the time it was happening that Vlad waited to stop paying until the Sultan was away on expedition in 1461. Once the Sultan learned of this, he was not happy. Also, according to Tursun Beg, Vlad had not only refused to pay any more tribute, but had begun conspiring with Mattia Corvinus. Mehmed II's spies informed him of this, prompting the Sultan to send an envoy to bring Vlad to Constantinople, with secret orders to capture the Impaler once he was over the Danube River. However, Vlad was too clever for this. Vlad likely found his orders to travel to Constantinople suspicious, especially considering he was secretly negotiating with Corvinus. As he and his forces made the journey, he soon found out about the plans for his capture. Taking the Sultan's envoy by surprise, he immediately secured those trying to take him in and executed them for their deceit and trickery. Suddenly, he had an idea. Having reached the Danube River, Vlad and his forces decided to use the Sultan's ruse to their advantage. Approaching the fortress of Giurgiu, Vlad made it seem like the envoy was still escorting them, speaking fluent Turkish as he asked the guard to open the gates. His men captured the fortress in a matter of moments. But he didn't stop there. Vlad realized there was no turning back and doubled down on his decision to finally invade the Ottoman Empire. Starting with the villages in the immediate area, Vlad surged across the region, eventually slaying around 23,884 Turks and Bulgarians, as he wrote to Corvinus. Mehmed responded to this threat accordingly. By this point, Vlad's reputation for strength and aggression had grown so much that Mehmed II knew it would be fatal to underestimate him. Additionally, more than defeating Vlad, the Sultan seemingly wanted to overtake Wallachia at last, so he mustered an army of over 150,000 men. Finally, they landed. Sultan Mehmed and his army rushed to the Danube, landing at the Brela port in May before crossing the river and arriving in Nikopol, Bulgaria a month later. Vlad was ambitious for sure, but he was also smart enough to recognize when he and his men stood outnumbered, so he quickly retreated to Târgoviște. Of course, Vlad had more of a plan than that. The chances of winning an all-out fight against Mehmed's army were slim at best, so Vlad elected to try a more stealthy approach. Sneaking into the enemy camp in the middle of the night, Vlad and a small group of men targeted the Sultan's tent, hoping to slay him while he slept, or at least take him captive. Unfortunately, that's where things went awry. Moving through the Ottoman camp in complete silence, Vlad and his men approached the Sultan's tent, ready to pounce on the ruler. However, at the last moment, something went embarrassingly wrong. The Wallachians tore open the tent to find that it was not the Sultan's, but that of his viziers, forcing Vlad and his guards to flee from the camp. Stealth wasn't Vlad's only kind of alternative tactic though. As June ended, the Sultan was ready to take the fight to Vlad's forces, now holed up at Târgoviște, or so he thought. Once the Ottomans arrived, they found no living person inside the town. Only the macabre sight of thousands of bodies on stakes, littered around in what they later referred to as a forest of the impaled. This certainly took a mental toll on the Ottomans. Ultimately, Sultan Mehmed II's invasion failed, and most of his forces withdrew from Wallachia. Although they had superior numbers, the intense heat, thirst, and psychological damage from Vlad contributed to their retreat. Still, Vlad knew he couldn't win forever on his own. They needed help. Also withdrawing from Wallachia, he travelled to the Carpathian Mountains, hoping to call on his old friend Matteo Corvinus to aid him. Together, they may have had a chance against the Ottomans. Meeting Vlad in Transylvania in 1462, Corvinus sat down with the voivode and discussed the terms of their alliance. Although they spent several weeks going back and forth, Corvinus's final decision was to refuse Vlad's request. Although the Impaler put forward some compelling arguments, the bottom line was that Corvinus didn't want to fight the Ottoman Empire. However, the answer no wasn't the worst of it. Following their negotiations, Corvinus wasn't satisfied with simply letting Vlad return to Wallachia freely. As soon as the Impaler reached the commune of Ruka, the mercenary commander John Yiska of Brandis overwhelmed Vlad and took him as a prisoner, all on the orders of Corvinus. Still, they couldn't just hold him captive without a reason. Although Vlad needed help actually fighting the Ottomans, he wasn't without allies entirely, as the Venetians and Pope Pius II supported his campaign. This meant that when Corvinus captured Vlad, he needed to state a reason why. Conveniently, he showed 3 letters by Vlad, in which the Impaler offered to ally with the Ottomans against Hungary. However, something very fishy was going on. Whether or not it was obvious at the time, most historians agree that the letters Corvinus presented to Vlad's allies were in fact forgeries. Furthermore, the real reason must have been something truly unjustified, as Corvinus's court historian wrote that the ruler never specified what it was, although someone else had an idea. According to the Bishop of Eger, Gabriele Rangoni, the explanation of Vlad's captivity was clearly due to his barbarism. In the bishop's account, a shocking rumour about Vlad's habits while in prison began to spread. Allegedly, he couldn't keep from his impaling ways, and the rats around him frequently became his new victims. Even though he may have terrified his captors, his freedom would have to wait. Vlad's captivity was not to be taken lightly, and all hopes of Corvinus coming to his senses or releasing the Impaler once the message had gotten across went out the window. Initially held in modern-day Alba Romania, Corvinus had Vlad brought to the town of Visegrad, where he remained under lock and key for 14 years. Even after all that, the answer was still the same. After a 14-year stay at Corvinus's captive, Vlad had only gotten out because he became a Catholic, at least according to Slavic legend. Now that the two were on the other side of their little schism, there was still the question of Corvinus's help. However, even though he considered Vlad to be Walachia's lawful prince, Corvinus still wouldn't involve his forces. At the same time, he had no problem using Vlad for his own benefit. Now a free man, Vlad couldn't keep from fighting for long, especially since Corvinus wanted the Impaler to battle the Ottomans for him. Along with a Serbian nobleman named Vuk Gregorović, Vlad fought across Bosnia, slaying waves of civilians and impaling Ottomans by the hordes. But this wasn't his last tag team mission. In mid-1476, Vlad's old ally Stephen III ended the Battle of Vala Alba in defeat as the Ottomans invaded Moldavia. In response, Vlad leapt again into action, this time accompanied by Hungarian commander Stephen Báthory. The two charged their forces against the Sultans, breaking his siege on Námp's citadel and forcing him back. These partnerships proved fruitful. Since Vlad's imprisonment, Mehmed II had proclaimed another of Vlad's cousins, Basarab Laiota, Walachia's lawful ruler. However, men like Stephen Báthory and Stephen III, and of course Vlad Țepeș, were intent on removing this pretender. Therefore, both Stephens prepared to invade Wallachia during the fall of 1476. With friends like these, Vlad's journey back to the throne wouldn't be long. Over the next couple of weeks, Vlad and Stephen III took over Bucharest, defeating the forces of Basarab Laiota so badly that he had no choice but to flee to the Ottoman Empire by November 16th. By the 26th, Vlad had reclaimed the crown and become voivode again. Of course, as history often goes, this new reign was short-lived. Naturally, even though Vlad had ousted Laiota from the throne, the conflict hadn't truly been put to rest. The following month, Laiota returned with not only a vengeance, but also a host of Ottoman forces around 4,000 strong. Refusing to allow the Ottomans to retake his throne, Vlad and his 2,000 men made their stand, resulting in their defeat and Vlad's ultimate demise. At least that's one possibility. As it happens, the true nature of how Vlad met his end remains another mystery. Several accounts include different stories, such as an assassin slaying him in the night, or him being decapitated after enemies ambushed him and his men. Adding to the intrigue is the fact that, despite him being such a notorious ruler, no one has ever found his final resting place. And in 1993, a discovery added to the mystery. To this day, many people still believe that Vlad the Impaler was buried in the monastery of Snagov in Romania. However, in 1993, the archaeologist Dinu V. Rossetti excavated his alleged tomb and made a chilling discovery. Rossetti didn't find any human remains, but rather horse bones, only adding to Vlad's prevailing mystery. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.